Today we're going to talk about the private FM radio channels and specifically the question of allowing news and current affairs programs on these radio stations. Now, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, that is TRAI, has sought views on various issues, including whether private FM radio stations should be permitted to broadcast independent news bulletins. Currently, private FM radio operators are allowed to carry the news bulletins of All India Radio in exactly the same format without any alteration. No other news and current affair programs are permitted, but this restriction does not apply on information related to traffic, weather, sporting events, cultural events, career counseling, and public announcements related to civic amenities, etc. Now, industry bodies and players have made representations that FM radio stations must be allowed to broadcast news and current affairs, just as it is allowed on private TV channels and digital platforms, among others. In the United States of America, UK, Canada, and Australia, there is no bar on broadcasting news on radio, but with a strong condition that they have to follow certain guidelines. So today we'll try and understand the why and how behind this, also the pros and cons of allowing or not allowing, and what does the industry say and what does the experts say on this particular issue. Let me first introduce our panelists to you. Beginning with, we have Mr. Rajendra Chugh with us here in the studio. He's the former chief news editor, news reader rather, of All India Radio. Welcome, Mr. Chugh, to Sunset TV studios here as well. I'll also introduce the other two guests before we begin. Mr. Sudhir Gupta is with us. He's former secretary TRAI, and Mr. Nisha Narayanan is also joining us, director and COO of Red FM. Welcome, both of you as well, to Sunset Television. Let me start with the why first, Ms. Narayan, and I'll start with you only because you represent the industry here. The industry seemingly has sort of given a representation to TRAI and the authorities that you should be allowed to carry news and current affairs program. Now, I'll begin with a simple and a small question. Why should you be allowed to do that?
The simple answer, Vishal, is that I think there should be a level playing field for radio. I'm saying when we're allowing news and current affairs on all other mediums, be it digital, be it television, print, everywhere, regional newspapers are talking about news. There are magazines which are allowed news, etc. The internet is booming with news. Then not allowing news on radio, I think, is not a fair thing to do. One should not regulate the medium so much. One needs to have a level playing field. And also, to me, at the larger level, as an industry, I'm saying that radio is only about less than 5% of the overall M&E sector. Now, if the industry needs to boom, we need to kind of give it a lot of fillip, and therefore, one of the other reasons to allow news should also be, from a business perspective, where news should also be allowed. So that's as simple as I can put it for you as to why news should be allowed on radio, and not just that. I'm just saying that FM. When we talk about FM's present all across the country, and it is local transmission. So when we're talking about local transmission, we're also talking about local news that can be given. So we can customize the news. The local listener wants to know what's happening in his town. Not always a very national or an international perspective. He's more related to what is happening in his own town, in his hometown, etc. Now, those are things that FM can really, really provide. So we're not using FM radio's potential to its fullest. I think by allowing news and current affairs on radio, it'll add to all of that.
Okay. We'll go into the details here as well, but let me first seek views of the other experts here on the panel. Rajendra ji, you've been part of the radio broadcast industry for more than 5 decades now. Been involved with the news broadcast as well to a greater extent. What is your view? Should the private FM radio stations and community radio stations as well be allowed to, broadcast news and current affairs programs on their own rather than, broadcasting exactly the same which is there available on All India Radio?
निशा जी ने अभी कहा कि हमें level playing field चाहिए. To this extent, I am for it. But it should be under a very strict regime of guidelines and supervision. That's my initial statement. Because when we talk of FM channels, we do not talk of only entertainment radios, that is radios like Radio Mirchi, but also community radio, because they also broadcast on FM channels. And both the FM channels, entertainment radio and community radio, both have been demanding the allowance for news and current affair programs from their respective channels. अभी तक की जो व्यवस्था है कि आप ऑल इंडिया रेडियो का न्यूज़ कंटेंट विदाउट टैंपरिंग विद इट आप अपने यहाँ से ब्रॉडकास्ट कर सकते हैं, जो कि बहुत स्टेशंस कर भी रहे हैं, कम्युनिटी लेवल के ऊपर बहुत से स्टेशंस कर रहे हैं, लेकिन मुझे नहीं, मेरी नॉलेज में नहीं है कि कोई एंटरटेनमेंट रेडियो, रेडियो मिर्ची टाइप रेडियो का, ऑल इंडिया रेडियो का न्यूज़ कंटेंट अपने यहाँ से रिले कर रहा होगा। विशाल, दिस इन्वॉल्व्स अ लॉट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस because they need logistics, infrastructure, trained workforce, और सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि जो आप कंटेंट डिसाइड करेंगे उसको आप नेशनल, इंटरनेशनल, लोकल, रीजनल, और रेडियो के एफएम चैनल्स तो सिटी के लेवल पर हैं, तो सिटी लेवल न्यूज़ में किस तरीके से आप सेग्रीगेट करेंगे, किस तरीके से आप उसको प्रसारित करेंगे, और किस तरीके से आप देहरादून में बैठे, त्रिवेंद्रम में बैठे, सिलीगुड़ी में बैठे या जैसलमेर में बैठे अपने लिसनर तक पहुंच पाएंगे। यहाँ तक ये बात मानने लायक है कि अगर अखबार का पाठक अखबार पढ़ सकता है जी, टीवी का न्यूज़ देखने वाला टीवी पर न्यूज़ देख सकता है, तो वाई शुड अ रेडियो लिसनर शुड बी डिवाइड ऑफ इट। रेडियो लिसनर के पास भी ये फैसिलिटी पहुंचनी चाहिए। इन प्रिंसिपल एवरीबॉडी शुड एग्री टू इट। और अभी ट्राई ने जो फ्लोट किया है पेपर, उसके हिसाब से सबको इसका वेलकम करना चाहिए, लेकिन इट्स नॉट दैट इजी जितना कि हम कह रहे हैं।
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Sudhir Gupta here as well, former secretary TRAI. Mr. Gupta, you heard both the views here. It seems both sides are agreeing on one part here, that in principle it should be allowed. So the question which I put to you is that not only whether it should be allowed or it should not be allowed, but if it is allowed, then what kind of guidelines, what kind of the framework which we are looking at. The argument from the industry is that if it is allowed on private TV channels, if it is allowed on digital media as well, then why not give us the chance also?
No, I agree with both the speakers that presently there is no reason why news channels should not be allowed, or news should not be allowed for private FM broadcasting also. Because when TRI gave this recommendation way back in 2015, now in last 7-8 years, a lot of changes have happened. And I really don't see any reason why it should not be allowed. But I would still have a caution that it should be only allowed for FM broadcasters, not community radios. Because as far as community radios are concerned, they are not that way regulated as FM private broadcasters are and licensed. And a number of community radios are also probably run by people who are or organizations who are inimical to our national security also. So with this condition, I would agree that they should be allowed.
I'll come back to Ms. Narayan here. Ms. Narayan, seems like there is an overwhelming support here, at least on our panel, for allowing news and current affairs programming on private FM channels. But that sound of caution, can you say something to me, please?
I'm just wanting to add to what Chug and Mr. Gupta said. I'm just saying, in terms of regulation, there is nothing stopping us or the government to kind of put out a regulatory framework, right, or a monitoring unit, like BPSC has a Caversham unit. So you can put a monitoring unit which can give strict guidelines of do's and don'ts on news. All right, and every radio player should be following those rules, etc. And any deviation, there could be a very strong penalty. But not allowing news completely, I don't think is an option, because we have to probably allow that. That is one part of it. So what kind of news and to what extent, and what is the kind of freedom, or what is the news guidelines that needs to be done and needs to be followed, is something that can be strictly followed by all the players. One. The other part, in fact, Mr. Chug raised it somewhere in his talk as well. I'm just saying that most of the radio players are owned by big media houses who also have news gathering units. So when they have television channels, they have newspapers, they run digital companies of news, etc. The fourth wing, which is the radio, should also be allowed. So news gathering units, training the teams, etc. All of that is a possibility, as long as there are strict guidelines, and we should be mandated to follow those guidelines. And any deviation, there should be a strong penalty. That's all I would probably want to say. A level playing field is a must. Probably taking news only from say a Prasar Bharati or an All India Radio and having the same RJ of All India Radio being broadcast on all private FM channels is probably not a great thing to do. So we should be allowed to, freedom to deliver news as long as it's within the guidelines. That's the request from the industry.
Okay, you responded to two aspects here, Ms. Narayan. There is a third one also. You're saying that the industry is more than